I had the privilege of meeting our speaker about 4 years ago, and during that time, I've been involved with the National Mountain Warfare Museum. I was invited to be on the board about 2 years ago, one of the great privileges of my life. I met Bob Crouch, Lieutenant Colonel Bob Crouch, about 4 years ago when he and General Funk came down to Florence, and we had lunch there at D. Boone's, and they told me about the plans to build this museum. Lieutenant Colonel Bob Crouch served honorably in the military in Germany, Iraq, Afghanistan. Retired in May of 2011 as Lieutenant Colonel. He is married to Dr. Colleen Crouch. They have a son and daughter, both very accomplished in what they're doing. It's just a great honor to know Bob as a friend, be with him and see him work and lead the development of this museum. He is an accomplished military person. We're proud to have him in our presence. It's just an honor to know you, Dr. Bob Crouch, Lieutenant Colonel Bob Crouch. Come up here and give us a report on the museum. Thank you for being my friend.
Thanks.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
That's what I love, the cheeriness and excitement out there. So I want to thank you all very much for this opportunity to speak to you. And I'd also, on behalf of myself and my boss, Lieutenant General Retired Butch Funk, to thank you for your service. You know, I'm very fortunate that in my time in the military, you know, post Desert Storm and post Desert Storm, our country was kind enough to recognize the contributions that those of us in uniform have made, but that wasn't always the case. And many of you served during a time when our country didn't treat you right, didn't respect what you did for our country. But as the son of a Vietnam veteran, I thank you for your service. So, how many of you all heard me talk about the National Mountain Warrior Museum before? A couple folks. Well, good. This is going to be a new experience for many of you. So we're going to roll right into it. If I can get this to work. You're right. It's not going to work. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our mission as the foundation. Talk about some, three things that are very near and dear to your heart: service, sacrifice, and valor. We'll talk about the role of the museum, and then we're going to go into details. Next slide.
In the heart of Central Texas, there's a place that prepares men and women, mounted warfare soldiers, to make a difference in the world. It's known as the Great Place. Behind the legend, there are countless untold stories. To honor the mounted warfare soldier and tell the soldier's stories, the National Mounted Warfare Foundation is building a world-class 21st century museum next to the Great Place. The stories are a national treasure. Imagine a place where you can make a personal connection to our soldiers. A place to learn not only what they do, but also who they are. It's the great, untold American story. Their story is our story.
We are mounted warfare soldiers. What we do makes a world of difference.
Step Step into the story. Step into history. Feel what it's like to be part of something bigger than yourself.
And again, everybody in this room knows what that means to be a part of something bigger than yourself. Next slide, please. So our mission as the foundation is to plan for, raise the funds for, and then build a world-class military museum, the National Mounted Warrior Museum, outside the front gates of Fort Hood. And for those that have heard us talk about this before, I'm proud to tell you that from the last time I spoke to you, all about 2-3 years ago, we've got the phase 1 of the building complete. And we're going to talk you through that a little bit. Next slide, please. So most of you know, how many folks have served on Fort Hood? A good handful for you. So you know that Fort Hood holds roughly 10% of the active duty Army. And we have also the largest National Guard division here in the state of Texas that serves on Fort Hood. If you look active again, you know we've got 10% of the Army at Fort Hood. 25% of the active force is somewhere in the state of Texas, whether it's here, San Antonio, or El Paso. So why do we build this here? You know, we wanted to build this museum where the soldiers are, not back east or in the Beltway where there aren't soldiers. We wanted this to represent those soldiers and units that served on Fort Hood from its founding as Camp Hood in 1942. So it's we're very well connected to the state of Texas here, those that serve in the military. Next slide, please. So our job is to build this museum because we want to capture the stories of the people that serve. You know, a lot of museums, old school museums, are focused on artifacts. You know, you'll find this hat behind glass and a little 3x5 card, but you don't get a feel for who used it, why it was used, and whatever. We want to be, and we are basing our museum on your stories. And so we're going to talk in a few minutes at the end about what I'd like your help with on that. But so we are also an educational resource for military museums. Army museums have one main mission, and that is to train soldiers. The converse of that is educating the public. And we think that our public needs to know more about what we do in the military, what we do in the Army in defense of the nation. And then we want to be a resource for higher education, serve as a place where the 120 plus schools within a 60-mile radius of Fort Hood can bring their kids for field trips to learn about duty and service and valor, in addition to some STEM things and some other core curricula that they'll need as they're going through their education. Next slide, please. So our master plan, which was designed by Lord Cultural Services back in 2011, we've been around since then, is when we started, called for a $38 million project. And I'm going to break down for you what that entails. Next slide, please. So we have some great partnerships, the Army being our biggest one. They allowed us to build the museum on 17 acres of land immediately outside the front gate. I'll show you a picture of that, but there's some definite advantage to that. And they are also sponsoring all the exhibits. In other words, they're paying for the design, fabrication, and installation to the tune of about $5 million that they're pouring into the exhibits. And then we're also partnered with the Texas A&M University Central Texas for the last 8, 9, 10 years. We've co-sponsored the Central Texas Military History Symposium with them, that we attract scholars and guests from all around to come and participate in that. The big piece that we think we're very fortunate about is this last bullet. I'm not sure how clear it is, but our job again was to build the building, and then we turn the building over to the Army. And the Army is then responsible for the day-to-day operations of the museum, the funding for all the utilities, so we don't have to raise money to keep the building sustained over time. They also provide the staff and the security for the museum. By the way, our foundation is now, we're down to 2 people. It's myself and General Funk. We do have some consultants that help us with different things, and we have a great board that helps out But as far as core staff, we're lean and mean because we want to make sure that we're really focused on getting this building done. Next slide, please. So the location, for those that are familiar, this down below the screen is Interstate 14 or Highway 190 as most people still remember it. This is TJ Mills Boulevard running into Fort Hood and the visitor center right here. Off the screen to the top is where the gate is. And so there's a couple advantages of this location. First off, to come visit this museum, you don't have to have an ID card or get a visitor's pass to get on post. All you have to do is come as if you're going to the visitor center, pull into the parking lot, visit the museum, and then take Santa Fe Loop out. That's a great event. That's a great advantage to us. We don't know, previously there were two museums on Fort Hood, the First Cav Museum and the Third Cav Museum, which both closed on the 1st of October of last year because they're rolling into this museum. We don't know, though, anecdotally, how many guests we lost because people just didn't know how to get on post. And if you don't know, for those of us that have been on Fort Hood or on any military post, it's second nature to us. But if you don't know how to get on post, you're not going to try. So we're pretty excited about what that does for us. The second advantage of that location is the building is visible from the highway. I'm told that at night, if you're on Nolanville Hill and you know what you're looking for, you can see the top ring of the rotunda, and so it's very visible. But the third advantage that we think we have is this space right here, and that is the stable area for the 1st Cavalry Division's Horse Cav Detachment, which we think is really an advantage for us because right now they hold full dress rehearsals of the routines once a week here in this covered arena. When we open for visitors, they plan on increasing that to 3 to 4 times a week so that our visitors can go and see this. And they're also working on improving their jumps and jumping areas out here so they can do some other performances. And they want to offer tours of their facilities in the stables because they do everything for the horses that a mid-1800s cavalry unit would do, including the horseshoeing, all the leather work. And so they're very excited to be our living history exhibit. Next slide, please. Give you a brief overview of where we are. Everything in dark blue that you see is what we're calling phase 1. And our goal was, originally we had, we named 7 phases or so, but we realized that the most important thing was to focus on phase 1, which is everything we need to do to open the doors to visitors, and the rest will come later. So everything in dark blue is phase 1. It's the parking lot, the entry plaza, the rotunda, 13,000 square feet of permanent exhibit space, which, by the way, if you've been to the museums at Fort Hood, there's more exhibit space just in phase 1. There's actually almost 3 times as much exhibit space as those 2 museums had combined. The other thing we have that the other museums didn't have is a 1,200 square foot temporary exhibit hall so that we can bring in things and keep the museum fresh for our visitors. The permanent exhibits won't change or get updated maybe every 10 years. The temporary exhibit hall, we can bring exhibits in and shows in on a 9 to 12 month basis. And our first one, it sounds like we're going to have in place maybe in June time frame will be an exhibit on Bill Malden, the famous cartoonist from World War II. So the other phases that we have planned, the second phase is to build all these other components, and there's no particular order in which we're going to build them, but it includes an 11,000 square foot expansion of the permanent exhibit hall, a very beautiful amphitheater out the back door, 2 sets of 2 classrooms, total about 7,000 square feet, that are configured with air walls, so you can have independent classes, 4 independent classes, or you can configure it in any way or open all of that up into the rotunda for a large event. And then we've got office space that'll be put in for the curator crew from Fort Hood, and then a gift shop and our office space. Our office space will be the last thing that goes into the building. If I were king for a day, I'd build 2 classrooms because that helps us better do the education piece of this. But the reason that we have gone away from naming the various other components is because what we build next is all dependent upon what a donor wants to build. If a donor comes in and says, I want to build the permanent exhibit hall and funds it, then that's what's next. But we're hoping that the classrooms will be what we get to build next. Next slide, please. Some pictures of it. And Tom was talking earlier. Tom Burdett is a good friend and one of our board members. He's been up to see it. And so I just wanted to show you where we are. By the way, so we are entering our 11th year as a foundation. And so when we started this project. Most similar museum projects take twice the time that we have. It's usually about 18 to 20 years before they're even able to break ground. And here we are at 10 years, and we've got phase 1 underway. And just some views from the parking lot. Again, at night, the whole thing is lit up, and it's absolutely gorgeous. We have an XM1 tank, which is the prototype for the M1 out in the front. And then the entryway. Next slide, please. Just some views from around the museum. Next slide. And the rotunda is absolutely gorgeous. The ceiling of it is a beautiful wood. By the way, what you see right here, can you go back one slide? I'm sorry, 2 slides. One of the things you're going to see besides this M1 as you walk in is and we'll talk about this in just a minute with the exhibits, but there's going to be an OH-6 Loach helicopter hanging from the ceiling of the rotunda, greeting you through the window.
Okay.
And there's 2 things my boss, I got some cheers out here, I like that.
Yeah.
Are you all former Loach pilots or crewmen?
First cab.
Cool. So my boss, he told me 2 things. He gave me 2 missions when I started this. He said, first off, that helicopter has to have the markings from the troop he commanded in Vietnam, which was Alpha 19 Cav. And so we're getting that one taken care of. And the second thing he told me is make sure there's enough stalls in the ladies' restroom.
Yeah.
There's 10. So, and they all have, and each restroom has changing tables and all that. But yeah, that second one is the one I really didn't want to screw up. Go ahead, next slide, please. Next slide. But yeah, so you'll have that loach hanging from the ceiling. Next slide, please. And then this is the permanent exhibit hall. 13,000 square feet looks like a big space, and when you're in there, it feels like it. But unlike the other 2 museums, we're going to have combat vehicles inside here. We've got, next slide. So we're going to talk about our exhibits now. Next slide. So when you enter the rotunda, I mentioned that the Loach helicopter hanging from the ceiling. But what we want you to experience when you walk in is to get an idea, an understanding of the evolution of mounted combat in the Army. And the way we're going to do that is a 3-part display on the floor, and then of course the helicopter. The first part of the display will be a trooper on horseback to represent the origins of mounted combat. In the center is a Renault FT, or will be a Renault FT-17 tank that was used by American Expeditionary Forces in World War I. And that represents the transition from horsepower to mechanized. Of course, you have the helicopter hanging from the ceiling to represent going from a ground-based force to one that can conduct vertical envelopment and maneuver in depth. And then the last piece of that exhibit will be a replica of a soldier launching a drone to represent how, as we transition somewhat, we've gone from riding on combat platforms to soldiers becoming the combat platform for the technology. And then there'll be other banners and things in there to talk about the key terms when it comes to mounted combat. So we really want you to get that first early understanding of what all that means. And then you're going to come into the exhibit hall and follow a path. The exhibit designers there'll be 16-foot walls in there, so you won't know what you're going to see until you turn the corner. But it'll start off with, again, a little bit about the origins of mounted combat. We transition into the World War I area, and then into the World War II area with Europe and fight in Europe and the Pacific. Unfortunately, we have units in Fort Hood that served in one or both of those. Then you come around to the Cold War area, which is, of course, Korea. We're talking primarily Korea and Vietnam. And we move into the Army in Transition is what we're calling the next set of exhibits, talking about how we changed in the 70s and 80s to become the force we are today. We talk about, then we go to Desert Storm, the Balkans, stability support operations, humanitarian operations, and then you'll finish up with 2 exhibits on, the first one being the future of Fort Hood, and the second being the future of mounted combat. And we're very fortunate that we've got or what's it called? Why am I drawing a blank? Futures Command down in Austin that's helping us visualize what this future is going to look like. But as you can see, we've got some big pieces of equipment that are going to be in here. We've got a M36 tank destroyer, we've got a Sherman tank, I believe that's a Jeep. We've got a Huey, a couple of motorcycles, we've got a Sheridan, we've got a Bradley fighting vehicle, a MRAP, and then a Stryker. So once you start putting that equipment into 13,000 square feet, it starts sucking up the space. It's interesting, the Army up until 2 years ago said, hey, we want you to start your, talk a little bit about mounted combat in the mid-1800s, and then really pick up steam with the founding of Camp Hood in 1942. 2 years ago, they came to us and said, no, we'd really like you to start in 1776 with the Revolutionary War and talk about all combat coming forward. So despite this 550-page exhibit plan that we came up with, trying to fit these things in here, the only thing we had to remove is a Humvee. So they're going to be able to tell the whole story, exhibit designers tell the whole story. And the cool thing is we also have 35 interactives throughout the room here, throughout the exhibit place. Some of the interactives may be video and audio, some may be audio only, some may be special effects. You come around the corner and you come into the tank destroyer, maybe it's lights and sounds that replicate the battlefield. We also have some low-tech interactives in there, like here's your M1 Garand and here's your Springfield. What's the weight difference? Why is it different? But we also have, I believe, they have 4 touch tables planned that will go in throughout the main exhibit area. And the beauty of those is they're fully programmable and whatever we want to put on them. What General Funk has suggested is we have one in the Desert Storm area, and we replicate digitally the Battle of 73 Easting during Desert Storm. And what we could do with that is, Tom could play the coalition forces and I could play the Iraqi forces, and we make decisions and see how the battle would have turned out based on our decisions. So it becomes a very interactive, immersive experience. Next slide, please. So our timeline, we reached substantial completion back in November. They're just finishing up the punch list for the building right now. We are scheduled right now to turn the building over from the contractor to the Army on the 30th of this month. We're going to do a soft opening likely in June. And again, as I mentioned, we hope to have that temporary exhibit in place. But the other thing we want to do is have some kiosks where you can watch videos, and we also will be doing special events over the next 18 months. So I mentioned that the Army is providing the exhibits or paying for the exhibits. The Army, as does everyone in the military, works on a fiscal year basis. They didn't expect us to be this far ahead of them, and so they're a little behind us. They had $1 million allocated for this last fiscal year to design the exhibits, and so there is an exhibit designer, as I showed you, who's working on that. He has until June to finish his plan, and then they'll either contract with him or someone else to go ahead and build and install the exhibits. But with that, we won't be able to be fully open do a grand opening and have all the bells and whistles until the summer of 2023. The last time I came and talked to you, we had our economic impact based on what Lord Cultural Services did in our master plan back in 2011, which suggested that we'd bring in 265,000 visitors a year, with about 200,000 coming from outside the Killeen Temple area. We recently had A&M Central Texas redo that economic impact statement. And because of the growth of the area and many things that have changed over the last 10 years, they're now suggesting that we can anticipate 377,000 visitors a year, which is a lot for our area. I mean, it's depending on the numbers you use, that could be anywhere from $9.5 million to $44.5 million injected into the region. So we think that's pretty important. Next slide, please. So let me close with this. There's a couple things you could do to help. First off, if you'd like to order a brick, I've put some brick order forms out there. You can go to our website, and it's on there. But we have about 700 bricks installed thus far. We've got room for 6,500. But you can honor anyone. Any branch of service, they don't even have to serve. The only thing is, and I'm not worried about it in this crowd, but don't put anything profane on the brick or anything like that. Well, I don't know. We have any Marines here? There could be some profanity. But we actually have had, I would tell you, we actually have probably almost as many bricks from Air Force, Navy, and Marines as we do from Army. And we've got some folks that aren't related to the military. We had a gentleman who's big in Navigators, which is a campus-based Christian group that wanted a break and put on. You can help connect us. One of the things that which most nonprofits struggle to do, is when you go to request a grant from a grant-giving foundation, is you're always better off if you know somebody on the board, right? Because they're going to take your application from this pile and put it in this pile and give you more favorable. So if you know anyone who's on the board of trustees or advisors or directors for a grant-giving foundation, we really appreciate you all sharing and connecting us. And I'm not going to ask you to raise funds for us. What I'll ask you to do is just open the door. And then you open the door and I'll take it from there. And also, if you know some folks who might be interested in contributing, some of the larger businesses in Georgetown or whatever, I'd really appreciate it if you turn me on to those. And I think just as important as everything I've talked about is spread the word. So we live in a community where we can put things on Facebook, have billboards, put it in the paper, whatever, be on the internet. But you all know as well as I do in small Texas towns, which we're all small, fairly small around here, the best way to get word out about something is word of mouth. So please leave here today and talk to people about this. Ask people, and this is an open invitation to everybody here. If you want to come and see and walk the building, I do a couple tours a week when people just let me know and bring them up. Would love to have this group come up and as a group at some point, maybe do this meeting there. We don't have internet right now, but we'll get there. The last thing that I would ask, since I'm talking to a group of veterans, it's not on this chart, is since about 2014, we have been collecting videos. So we've been doing a video program that we call Your Story. And it's an opportunity for you as a veteran or a family member or a community member to sit down with our videographer, a volunteer videographer, for about an hour and to have a conversation and talk about whatever you want to talk about from your experience in service. And he then takes those and the raw footage and whittles those down to 1 or more 3 to 5 minute vignettes. And right now we use those on our Facebook, on our YouTube channel, and social media. But all of those stories are going to be present in the museum, and we're going to put in some video kiosks where our kids and our grandkids can go and hear our stories preserved for all time. And that's important. And we're accepting stories from any branch of service, and particularly if you know any World War II vets, we're trying to catch them while we can. But that's important. How many people have been down to the Museum of the Pacific War down in Fredericksburg? Beautiful museum, right? But that human touch is not there. And this is how we get that human touch there. So would really love to get your stories. And that's a real simple thing. You can talk about whatever you want. And I'm going to close with why I'm passionate about this, why I'm passionate about these stories, why I'm passionate about this museum. And then I'll open for questions if you have. Both of my parents are now deceased. My dad served almost 29 years, retired as an infantry lieutenant colonel, put up his right hand in 1954, retired in 1982. A couple of years ago, several years ago now, probably around 2007, 2008, I was visiting my parents in their home in North Florida where they retired to. And it was, have you all seen the movie We Were Soldiers?
Yeah.
Mel Gibson. And that was required reading when I was a lieutenant, so I'd read it many years ago. But that movie had just come out, and I was doing something in my parents' house, and my mom came up to me and she said, "Are you going to go see this movie?" And I said, "Yeah, I read the book when I was a lieutenant because I had to, even though it's a great book. It's got Mel Gibson and all these great actors." And she stopped me short. She looked me in the eye and she said, "You know your dad is in the book."
Get the mic up in front of me.
Oh, is it dropping on me?
There we go.
I can be loud without the mic too. I just didn't realize. So, my mom said, "You know your dad's in the book." The book We Were Soldiers. And it floored me because they're quoted 4 or 5 times as Major Harry Crouch, who was Hal Moore's S4, his logistics officer during the Pleiku campaign. And that wasn't enough to teach me that I needed to ask my dad about what he did in the Army, even though I was serving at the time. You know, it was a couple, we shared a couple things over the years before he passed, and I learned that he, in 1961, he was in his third command of the No. Company, he got called from Augsburg, Germany, alerted and deployed from Augsburg up to a place called Berlin as the wall went up. But I only know a couple of his stories, and I've got his DD-214, I know where he served, what jobs he held, what awards he got, all of that, but that's just paper. And now now it's gone. And his stories are gone forever. And I'm determined not to let that happen to other people. Because your stories are your legacy, and are important to you, are important to your family, and important to the future of our country. So, if you would, please consider sitting and arranging to come to tell a story. So, that is all I have. Thank you very much. I'm open to questions if you have any. I know you've got a packed schedule, so I'll be here too.
One question. To build an honor, to build morale and things of that nature on that helicopter that you have hanging there. When I used to call for, or where I was at, we call for help or something for the chopper to come in. A lot of them had good looking ladies on them. But what impressed me the most for morale was the one that had a shark's teeth.
The shark's teeth?
That really impressed me. Because they even put them in airboats and everything else, but they come in there, it was like they're ready to fight, ready to go.
Yes, sir.
And I think if they come in there and they had that shark's tooth, that person that first walks in there, it impressed a whole lot of young people.
Absolutely. I think that's what they're planning for on the front of it. Yes, sir.
Where are they going to put the bricks? At the entrance?
Yes, at this plaza right here. And we actually have the first batch of bricks in the ground right now. And what we'll do is we'll order them every, whenever we get 15 or more, we'll order them and have them put in. Yes, sir.
In your World War II section, are you doing anything to commemorate the contribution of the Army Air Corps?
Yes, we are. It's recognized. I don't remember exactly how we're describing it, but we are recognizing the Army Air Corps, and we're also recognizing other things that we have. We own the story for the Women's Army Corps, really, because it started at Fort Hood. So we'll talk about things like that as well. Yes, ma'am.
How about the medical corps?
Medical Corps is part of, so our definition of a mounted warrior is someone that rides a combat platform into battle. Medical Corps members, just like quartermasters and others, are also mounted warriors. So there are, again, I don't know the specifics of how we're going to talk about that, but the whole purpose, one of the main purposes of doing this consolidated museum was instead of just talking about 1st Cav, and instead of just talking about 3rd Cavalry Regiment, I want to talk about all the soldiers that served over time on Fort Hood. So all the units will be represented.
Thanks a lot.
Absolutely.
Hey,
Thank you all very much.
so very much. Each month to have some informative information, and we recently, Larry Maletic, is that how you pronounce it? Is the commander of the new American Legion Post, and he said he has some amazing new information on widow benefits from the VA, and he said he could very briefly